Get the inside story on all of these topics. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly joins us now for a Fox News exclusive tonight. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Bret, thanks.
First, as you sit here, are you confident the administration and congressional leadership has the votes for a short-term funding to avoid a government shutdown Friday?
I spent a fair amount of time on the Hill today speaking to members of Congress, both sides of the aisle, and frankly, both sides of the Hill, and it would seem that they have the votes to continue funding the military, take care of the child health care issue, and perhaps some other things. So, as I understand it, they have the votes, and they're fairly confident.
It's not really what you wanted, but that's what...
No, I mean, the CRs get in the way of an awful lot of things, but they are the reality of life in Washington.
Your time on the Hill today got some headlines. The Washington Post has a story. It says Kelly called some of Trump's campaign pledges on immigration wall uninformed, meeting attendees say. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly told Democratic lawmakers Wednesday the United States will never construct a physical wall along the entire stretch of the U.S.-Mexico border, and that some of President Trump's campaign promises on immigration were uninformed. Comments put Kelly at odds with Trump, who repeatedly said during his presidential campaign that he would build a border wall that Mexico would pay for, not the U.S. taxpayers. Quote, concrete wall would be good only certain places, adding, saying manpower and drone technology should suffice in some parts. Kelly also saying that there will be no wall that Mexico will pay for. Your response to that?
Well, I met at my request today with the the House Hispanic Caucus. I've done that 3 other times when I was at DHS. Met with them today and had a discussion about a range of issues. I was mostly listening because I've heard them so many other times, and they know what the administration perspective is. But in any event, as we talked about things, where this president is and how much he wants to deal with this DACA issue and take it away, I told him that there's been an evolutionary process that this president has gone through as a campaign, and I pointed out to all of the members that were in the room that they all say things during the course of campaigns that may or may not be fully informed. But this president, if you've seen what he's done, he has changed the way he's looked at a number of things. He's adjusted the way he's looked at the South Asia strategy, Afghanistan. He's very definitely changed his attitude towards the DACA issue, and even the wall. Once we briefed him when I was at DHS and told him that the real experts on defending the southwest border, the Customs and Border Protection men and women, came in, did a survey of the border. There are places where hydrographically, geographically, a wall would not be realistic. There are other parts of the southwest border that are so wild and untamed that there is no traffic that goes through them. There's other places, we think about 800 miles additional wall to include the 600 that are already in place. The fencing would suffice. So he has evolved in the way he's looked at things. Campaign to governing are 2 different things, and this president is very, very flexible in terms of what is within the realm of the possible.
And Mexico's not going to pay.
That we have some ideas on how things like visa fees, renegotiation on NAFTA, and what that would mean to our economy. So in one way or another, it's possible that we could get the revenue from Mexico, but not directly from their government.
The reason you're at this point with Congress is because this bigger funding DACA border security deal never came through. Let me take you back to Tuesday, that bipartisan meeting at the White House, and then what Senator Graham is saying since.
You folks are going to have to come up with a solution. And if you do, I'm going to sign that solution. I'll take the heat. I don't care.
Those who think that we're going to get away as Republicans with getting all we want on defense now, and we'll deal with the kids later, the DREAM Act population, closer to March 5th when their back's against the wall. That is nuts.
Somehow by 12 o'clock on Thursday, something happened, and I don't think he was well served by his staff. I think General Kelly's a fine man, but he's also part of the staff.
So your reaction to that, let's go through the TikTok on Thursday. What happens?
Well, I would tell you, first of all, that what I'm about to describe to you is the process I put in place when I became the Chief of Staff, to make sure that the President of the United States is informed across the spectrum of an issue, and he hears both sides of the story, pros and cons, and everything in between. There was an early morning phone call from one of the senators that said that I was conferenced in on, that said that they had come
Durbin calls.
They had come with a solution, and the president was ecstatic. He said, "We've got money for the wall. We've got the various other things that the president is interested in: the end of chain or family-based migration, and the end of the visa lottery and money for the wall." The president was thrilled. Invited them over. So I then called other members of the Senate, because I was surprised at how fast this was happening. Other members of the Senate that are involved in this whole process, and they were completely uninformed that there had been a bipartisan initiative led by both Senators Durbin and Graham, apparently. They were uninformed of that, and these are men that have been informed or have been involved in this process. So I then went over to the Hill to talk to someone who's been a friend for 20 years and remains a friend, Senator Graham. I knew him in the House when he was a freshman and all the way up to this point. Got his impression of what this deal was. But it was clear to me that, again, it was bipartisan, no doubt, but it was from a kind of a focus group of bipartisan senators. I then went over to the House side to talk to McCarthy, Congressman McCarthy, Congressman Goodlatte, and the Speaker to find out if they had been involved in this process. They had not been. So at that point, again, I had two senators coming over with what I would characterize as a possible solution to the DACA issue, but it certainly occupies one end of the spectrum. So the president then asked that we invite some other senators and members of the House to come over.
The president asked for that.
He asked for that. And again, it's how I now force the staff to do business. I don't want the president to hear one side of a story. The president likes to talk about issues. He likes to hear everyone's side. He prefers, or not prefers, but he certainly enjoys the intellectual discussion and wants people to raise issues that perhaps are issues that he doesn't believe in.
So does he decide it's a bad deal once he starts hearing the details?
Well, in the course of the conversation, he said, well, this is certainly, something we can talk about, but this is not what I had in mind, but it's a start point, and we can talk about it. Just like Mr. Goodlatte, who is there, he has a proposed bill that is a great start point to talk about. So this begins the process. I went over to the Hill today, as you indicate, to talk to the Hispanic caucus, and then had a small group meeting with Senator Durbin and Steny Hoyer on the Democratic side, and the leader of the Hispanic caucus was there on their side as well, Senator Cornyn, and Congressman McCarthy, and had a great conversation, and this will lead eventually to, I believe, a solution to DACA.
All right, so just quickly some specifics. What does the president need to see on chain migration to bless a DACA deal?
The president sees that we should control that nuclear family, that people that qualify to come into the United States as immigrants, if they're married, of course, their wife would come in. If they have minor children, the minor children will come in. But not the parents, not the extended families. So that's where he is right now. This is, we can talk about this, but that's where he is.
And then is it a phase issue? Is it a phase one, phase two? And how much money does he need for the wall to bless this deal?
We think roughly 700 miles of wall, additional wall, to include, and also to include the fencing that's there. Some of it's only barriers to vehicle traffic. About $20 billion.
So that's not going to happen before Friday.
Unlikely, but again, there's two things, and I reminded the Hispanic caucus today. When I was at DHS, I pleaded with the United States Congress to come up with a solution because DACA was not going to stand the legal test. It didn't stand the legal test. We were sued. It had to go away. I then asked the president to give an additional 6 months to give the United States Congress an opportunity to sit down and work this out. Both sides of the aisle, both sides of the Hill. And we're right in the middle of that right now. The agreement or the extension ends on the 5th of March. There's no doubt in my mind there's going to be a deal, so long as men and women on both sides are willing to talk.
All right, a couple other things. We asked people on social media to weigh in if they had questions. One person, Mark, at Texas Eyelid Doc, says, I would ask you if he ever discusses with the president how his random, unfiltered tweets step on his message, or have you given up?
As I've said many times, I was not put in this job to change the way the President of the United States does business. I was put in the job to make sure the staff process better informs him on a range of issues. He oftentimes asks me, hey, I'm thinking of reinforcing whatever the message is on that given period of time with a tweet. What do you think? And absolutely. Sometimes he doesn't ask me that. He doesn't have to ask me that. He is his own man in this regard, and he feels very, very strongly that he's able to reach the American people out in Peoria and Montana and in central Wyoming through his tweets, because he doesn't feel as though he gets a completely fair shake from the media.
Now, you've often said that your role is not to control President Trump. Right. You're supposed to, deal with his schedule, the flow of information, not intervene. It's been reported that you did intervene recently following the tweet the president sent last week suggesting his opposition to Section 702 surveillance. An hour and a half later, another tweet seemed more in line with the administration policy. Is that correct? You intervened?
I spoke to the president about the issue. It's an important issue. It's the FISA reauthorization. Very, very important. Yep. Very, very important to law enforcement. He has strong feelings on personal privacy. Sent out the first tweet, sent out the second tweet. You went and talked to him. He and I talk constantly. Weekends, early mornings, late at night, we talk constantly. He bounces ideas off of me. I'm very proud of the fact that he respects my opinion. But again, he's the President of the United States. He's got his own way of doing business. But again, I see a man who is can change his mind when the facts and the data and the staff work and the conversation brings them to a different conclusion.
We've spent much of the last week hearing from various lawmakers and critics of the president saying that he is racist. Today, in a speech today, Arizona Republican Senator Jeff Flake, you heard some of it, said the president's description of the press as fake news is Stalin-esque. Here's another piece.
Not only has the past year seen an American president borrow despotic language to refer to the free press, but it seems he has now, in turn, inspired dictators and authoritarians with his own language. How do you respond to all that?
I think it's unfortunate that he would do that. I think he's completely wrong. It more than suggests to me that well, I just think he's completely wrong. I think it's beneath him, but he is a United States senator and he has his opinions, and he can voice them any way he wants, I guess.
Former White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon testified yesterday, didn't answer a lot of questions, refused to answer some before the House Intel Committee. Did the White House tell him to invoke executive privilege?
No.
No.
Steve has had very, very little contact with the White House since he left. I know Steve a little bit, not very well. He left the White House and has certainly never returned to the White House, and with the exception of a few phone calls here and there, very, very little contact with the White House. And I certainly have never spoke to him since he left.
This White House has seen a lot of turmoil, a lot of turnover, resignations, firings, a partial list here on the screen. A lot of folks. It's not what you usually see in an administration this early. How do you explain that?
I would tell you that it's very interesting. Every administration the first year or so has a fair amount of turmoil. I think that's fair to say. It is interesting to me as someone who has served on many, many staffs in my previous career that there's probably only one staff that I know of, certainly, that on the 19th of January in a given year is fully staffed up and functioning, and the next day they're all gone, and there's new people in the job. And so I would tell you, as I said many times, campaigning is very, very different than governing. It's really, really hard work to govern at this level. And some people that were perhaps involved in the campaign didn't make that transition. I came to the job 6 months after this, almost 7 months after this administration took over. And I would tell you I won't comment before, but
which is a lot of that book that got a lot of coverage.
All of it. The day after I took over, we fundamentally focused on better staff work, stop this foolish backbiting leaking, which is all but stopped, and serve the president, because to serve him well, he succeeds. And whether you voted for him or not, whether you like him or not, If he succeeds, the nation succeeds. Look at the economy. Look at what's going on. If he fails, the nation fails.
Two quick things. North Korea seems like they've had negotiations. Obviously, the Olympics changes the equation. But if Kim Jong-un does not abandon his nuclear program, is the U.S. headed for war?
I hope not. But I don't think, this is one of those things that landed on this president's lap. It's been in the process for 25 years. We've kicked the can down the road. The problem at this point in time is there's no road left. We have to deal with this guy. He cannot have a deliverable atomic weapon that can reach the United States reliably. It just cannot be. Obviously, we'd much prefer, the president would much prefer to do this in alliance with every other nation of goodwill to convince this guy that it is not in his interest. But I believe we're out of road. There's no more place to kick this can.
Second interview in as many weeks, he wouldn't answer the question whether he's talked to Kim Jong-un. Has he?
He is. There are open channels, but I prefer not to comment on that. But there are a lot of people trying to help out here, and the president calls numerous national leaders, Chinese as an example, on a regular basis. Japan, Korea, others on a regular basis. Our ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, works that very, very hard and has gotten some great votes in the Security Council. But at the end of the day, this president is committed to ensuring the nation's safety.
Last thing, you have said that this is the toughest job you've ever had, tougher than being a combatant commander in Iraq. Are you in this for the long haul?
I am. This is not only the toughest job I've ever had, but it is, and I've done a lot of things in my life. This is the most important thing I've ever done in my life. I get no reason to be doing this other than my sense of service to the country. That's my #1 motivation, always has been for my whole life. So no heroics here. Never wanted to ever work another regular job in my life. This ain't a regular job. But I am in this for the long haul. It is the most important thing I've ever done in my life, because if the administration fails, if the President of the United States is uninformed one time and makes the wrong decision, that's on me. And those decisions at his level are so critical that people's lives obviously depend on it. So I'm in for the long haul.
Well, thank you for your service, sir, and we appreciate your time tonight.